All right,
Welcome
everybody.
everybody. We are super excited to have a very special guest here with us today.
I'm Molly. This is my wife, Asia.
Yeah. And we co-founded this group, White People Doing Something, and we created this group with the intention of allowing a space for people to actually understand what's going on in this world of racism and to create a really safe place to learn and grow and actually do something about it. No one has to sit on the sidelines anymore, and that is why we're here. And
Hmm.
today we have a very special guest. He's a New York Times bestselling author. If you have not read his book, My Grandmother's Hands, please check it out. I mean, most of you have, right? That's why you're here. But we have Resmaa here today. And Resmaa, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your thoughts and your everything with us. I will tell you that there are many, many big fans of yours, us also included. So
I
we're super
appreciate
excited
it.
to
I
have you
appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for having
Yeah,
here.
happy to.
So I'd love to start just for any if there's anybody online, I know there are not going to be many, who is not familiar with you. Like, how did you get into like all of this,
me.
right? Because infinite choices in life for the most part, right?
Right, right,
How did you decide like, okay, this is what I'm doing, and what is that thing, as you would
right,
say?
right. I think so. I always start answering that question based on what my mom told me. And my mom told me that I always leaned into people. Like, I'd let anybody pick me up. I walked towards people. It scared the bejesus out of her. But I always have liked people. I like people, right? I like the kind of I like the kind of human condition. And I think that um that actually aligned. I think I came on the planet with this, and I think that aligned with my purpose. And I kind of see my purpose as, helping people rise beyond just where they're at right now, but having a fuller, more understanding of what it is that we're contending with. And so I kind of feel like I've been doing this my whole life. Um, I've been doing some work with either around racism, white body supremacy. I've been doing some work with that. When I look back, I've been doing some work with that my whole life. Um, and so I think when it comes to understanding racialized trauma, all of those things, all of the reading, all of the study, all of the tempering and conditioning, I think that helped to prepare me uh, for when my grandmother's hands started to emerge. All of the conditioning that I dealt with before helped me be able to hold this in a different way. So, yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And so, can you just give kind of like an overview for anybody who might not know? Like, what is that? Like, what's the premise of that book?
Right. So there's a couple of different things. So my grandmother's hands, the text of my grandmother's hands actually sprung out of a particular story between me and my grandmother, and then melded together with my own personal lived experience. I don't think I couldn't have written the book um, without, like I said earlier, without a lot of the stuff that happened in my life. And so uh, the story of my grandmother's hands is really about a time where my grandmother used to lay on the couch, put her legs across our laps, and then one of us would rub her hands, because my grandmother always complained of arthritis. And so we would rub her hands, and she'd be in the kitchen. Sometimes you hear her go woo like that. But I didn't find out until afterwards, after my mom read the book, that my grandmother really did not have arthritis. It was never a diagnosed piece. And uh, so during this one particular incident or time, I was rubbing her hands, and my hands are pretty thin and angular. My grandmother was a smallish woman, but she had these fingers that were thick, right? Real thick fingers, and then thick in her palm, and then thick on the back of her hands. And so as I'm rubbing her hands, I think I must have been about 8 years old. As I'm rubbing her hands, I said, "Grandma, why are your hands so fat like that?" And without missing a beat, she goes, "Oh boy, that's from picking cotton," like that. And then I sat there, and she must have heard the pause, and so she turns to me. She said, "Boy, you ever seen a cotton plant? Cotton plant got these burrs in it, and we were walking up and down the roads when I was 4 years old because Daddy was a sharecropper, and so when you reach your hands and at 4 years old, that stuff rips your hands up and bleeds and stuff like that." This is her cadence. This is how she's talking, right? And my little nervous system didn't know what to do with that, but I knew I needed to pay attention to it, right? And even if I couldn't articulate, even if what she was saying was decontextualized, I knew it was important. And so I did not remember that story again until I started writing my grandmother's hands. And I think one of the ways I was able to kind of get at the historical trauma, the intergenerational trauma, the persistent institutional trauma of white body supremacy, and then our own personal lived experience. I think one of the ways I was able to get at that was because I had done a lot of stuff working with people who have been traumatized already, and then started to experience in my own personal life, coming back from Afghanistan, my own trauma, very dramatic trauma stuff. And so that created kind of like this cauldron of things that all cooked. And so the historical pieces cooked, the intergenerational pieces were cooking, and luckily, it was able to cook and not burn. Um, but so that's how my grandmother's hands came about, and then my philosophy and structural understanding of white.
Oh, did we lose you? Oh, there we go.
It cut out for just a moment. So you said your structural understanding of white, and then it
Your
cut
white
out.
of white body supremacy, and my grandmother's hands is a part of that structural journey. So my grandmother's hands was my way of looking at all of this stuff. And also, it was a seminal moment in my own personal time and in my own personal life. And then my new book, The Quaking of America, is more about a seminal time in this nation's life. And so I'm kind of bringing those pieces together.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much because, like, I remember when I first read my grandmother's hands, like, I could relate. Like, I didn't talk to my grandmother about that, but I remember my dad telling me stories about how my grandfather
That's right.
picking cotton,
He was a
and
sharecropper.
he was a sharecropper, and
Yeah.
how, like, my dad, like, he spent like one summer down in Florida picking cotton. He was like,
That's
no,
it. That's it.
you
That's
know,
it. That's it.
yeah.
That's it. But we don't talk about the I don't the part in terms of my work that intersects with that or connects to that is that we talk about picking cotton, sometimes in almost a narrative way, and it doesn't. And in terms of embodiment, we have to start talking about it. That also includes the feralness and the charge and the brutality of that conditioning. My new book, I talk a lot about plantation ethics and how a lot of our structure is built around the strong white man plantation knower idea, and how that shows up in our both personal relationships and historical relationships, and it shows up as charge, it shows up as weight, it shows up as texture. It very rarely shows up as a uh, uh, a a um, a cognitive answer, right? It usually shows up as, oh, why is that reflex, or why is that particular genuflect to that? Why is that showing up with this level of energy, or why is that showing up without energy? There should be energy in this particular piece, and there isn't. How do we begin to be more curious about it, and start that curiosity through our bodies?
Ooh. I think that it's so key, right? Because something that we talk about, you know, a lot, right, is how, like, the premise of our whole group, right, is creating connection, right? And what gets in the way of being able to have that connection.
Right.
And so much, I think, of what it is like, is dealing with what's happening in the body.
Exactly right. 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 So this is one of the reasons why I really encourage people, especially bodies of culture. I encourage bodies of culture to be very, very particular about when it comes to race, who you allow to have access to your life force and your body.
Mm.
For there most even most white bodies that are on this call are descended from white bodies that were fleeing something. That fleeing never got dealt with.
Nope.
And the structural pieces that elite white bodies gave poor white bodies in order to deal with it were indigenous and black bodies, right? That put all of your hate, all of your anger and hate, and put all of your self-interest into the structural apparatus of white body supremacy. And you can blow all of that stuff that you've had, all of the issues that you've had with elite bodies that poor white bodies had with elite white bodies. You can blow all of that through indigenous people and genocide them. You can blow all that through indigenous people and put their babies in schools and kill the Indian and save the man, right? That those types of ethos, that ethos transcended just the borders of America and Canada. That was an export. That idea that the savage indigenous and the stupid uh, um, African is a species question. The race question in this country is a species question. And when we're talking about race, we a lot of times want to lop off the charge of race and that species question. We want to say, well, yeah, that's true, but let's move over, right? Without understanding that, as Einstein said, energy cannot be created nor destroyed, but it can be manipulated. It can be twisted. It can be thwarted. And so for me, my work really is about beginning to condition our bodies. Both, I always say that our bodies are both amplifiers and receivers, and we have to condition our body to be able to even know what frequency things are on, to be able to notice nuance, to be able to notice charge, and tempering. And a lot of times people just want to jump into a conversation and there's been no conditioning. And people and bodies of culture usually end up leaving those types of situations very wounded and extracted upon, and white bodies end up leaving those conversations at best enlightened, but really no apparatus to do anything with it, no ways of using it. So.
Yeah, you're speaking to exactly what this group was about, right? It was like it was a whole lot of people entering conversations without literally taking stock of where they were with anything and without the possibility of nuance, right? It was like there were people who were right and people who were wrong, and that's it.
And bad and good and nice and happy and
yeah, and sort of these false dichotomies of it's just not how it works. And so
Right.
in this group, we literally on Tuesdays we close all of the posts and we invite, I love how you say bodies of culture, to share their experiences, good, bad, otherwise. Share whatever it is on your head or heart, you know? And it is fascinating to see. We've been doing this now for almost 2 years, and it's fascinating to see people sort of are starting to breathe. You know, in the beginning, it was like people were messaging us and they go, I know I'm not supposed to comment, but and we were like, yeah, you're also not supposed to message us right now. You're literally supposed to be with whatever's coming up for you, you know, like just be with it. Just consider that if this is someone sharing their experience, and right or wrong, good or bad, true or untrue, you know, resonate or not resonate for you, just take it in. That's shifted. We don't get those messages. We don't get those messages anymore. But it's such a great point. It's like we just go into conversations, and especially in these sort of very heated moments,
Hmm.
especially in the
Hmm.
days following the murder of George Floyd. I know you said you're in Minneapolis, so I don't
Hmm.
tell you this.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was really, it was like we quickly, you kind of looked around and you were like, all right, whose side are you on?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, the reality is that many of us, you know, especially white bodies, have not had to deal with they've that white bodies deal with a lot of stuff. So so do bad things happen to white bodies? Absolutely. But not this.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But not this. And I think, you know, a lot of my work is getting people to slow down and not genuflect or bypass for narrative, because a lot of times, you know, people think that the narrative and the discussion stuff is the curative pieces, and really the curative pieces and what helps is for white bodies, and I'm talking about white bodies in particular, to get together with other white bodies and commit to each other for the rest of their lives in term to usher in a culture, not a strategy, not a book club, not a listening, right? But not a sourdough bread recipe thing, and not, you know, it's just let's we're going to commit to each other because we don't want to hand the brutality and the feralness down to our children's children. So some of this work I really believe can't be done cross culturally. I think it's going to take at least 9 generations before white folks collectively know what the hell is going on with race. I don't believe white bodies have um, have the conditioning and the tempering to usher in a living, embodied anti-racist culture, because that would involve. I mean, look, we've been in this particular experiment of white body supremacy, you know, for at least 9 or 10 generations. So to think that it's not going to take at least that long to unwrap this, I think a lot of people want things tied up into a bow. And if you're really trying to do somatic abolitionist work or living embodied anti-racism work, I think you have to absolve yourselves of those notions that this may be done in your lifetime, because real culture means that there is something present that you're moored in, and that people you are connected to people in a way in which things emerge and evolve over time. That's not something that you can do in 4 years. It has to be something, and especially for white bodies, because the structure is so built around their comfort that the slightest little room to get around dealing with race specifically, white bodies collectively will take it. They'll take it either through religion, through cognition, through yoga, right? They'll take it, and over time, I tell people, the people, your people are not the people you start with. It's the people you end with. It's the people that you're going to bury. It's the people that you're going to be raising children with. It's the people that are going to allow you to be elders to their children. Um, that's not just reading or being involved with something. This is a lifelong process.
That's so fascinating. And I'm going to disagree with you, Resma. I'm going to disagree with you.
Like,
Because here's like, and I think that's the question that I was in a long time, like for a long time. It's like, okay, this is going to take a while. And then I started to question, like, actually, it was in a conversation with my father about this, about the murder of George Floyd. And because I remember, right, I remember how growing up, I talked to my aunts and my uncles and like everybody in my family, and they were like, we did what we can, we did what we could, and now I'm passing the baton on to you. And I was like, okay, how many generations have we been passing the baton on? And what was missing? And so I was like, well, if I don't want to pass the baton on to my kids, what has to shift, right? And I think what was missing is a deadline. And I also think what was missing is this idea that we always tell each other, we always say it's going to take a long time, right? We've been telling ourselves this, we've been telling the same story, it's going to take a long time. So what if we started telling us something different? What if we could do it now, right? What if there was, now it seems completely unlikely, right? And it seems completely out of the realm of our normal way of engaging in this conversation, right? And it seems impossible. But I think anything that's been of value in human society was considered impossible at one point, right? At some point in time. And so maybe I'm naive. And I think, actually, I know that the possibility of us healing this in my lifetime is available. And I know that it's available because I can speak it, right? I can feel it, right? And so I don't know. I think that's just it. I think that part of what we do is like part of the pattern of white supremacy and this embodiment is we continue to allow this story of it's not going to happen now and it's going to take all this time. But says who, right? Yes, there is a lot. It's a lot. And what if it doesn't have to, right? What if it doesn't have to take 9 generations just because it has, right? Because if we look at the past, it will tell us like, okay, this is what it's done. This is how it's going to take to move forward. And what if that doesn't have to be true?
Okay.
What would that look like? I don't
Okay. Okay. That's all I'm gonna say. Okay. Hey, you get to see it and work with it the way you need to see it and work with it. That's cool. I have a different understanding in terms of an embodiment piece that I'm going by.
know.
And I don't go by whether or not people are meeting with each other. That's not what I go by. I go by can the structure, can the philosophy tolerate looking at race in all of its feralness? And I would say that there is not even a inkling of understanding about that in the collective white body. There is no there because they haven't had to. White bodies have not had to condition themselves vibratorily around race. They haven't had to condition themselves image and cognitions around race, meaning making and the shifts in meaning, behavior and urges, affect and feelings and emotionality, sensate and imaginations. The white body collective cannot conceive of a free Black body. They can't. It has not been demanded of them. And so when I say it's going to take at least 9 generations, white bodies, we've had over 5,000 lynchings in this country. Most people, most white bodies were not necessarily at those lynchings. They would probably consider themselves good white people. And I'm going to take a page out of what MLK said. Not upset with, he knows the citizens councils and what Bull Connor's going to do, but what about the good white folks, right? And so that's why I'm not going to argue with it. Life has a way of helping things get organized and aligned. And so my wish for white folks and white bodies in terms of this structure that they benefit from and are advantaged by, I don't think that comes because people are enlightened. I don't think that comes because people listen to other people. I think that comes from from rubbing up against each other, from grinding, from interrogating those pieces that we've ingested, from asking younger white bodies, asking their grandmammies and their granddaddies, were you involved with this structure? How were you? Were you involved with it by omission? And that becomes part of the texture of the culture, not just something you do as a one-off.
Right.
So you get to feel however you want to feel. That is not the way I operate, though. I don't operate as if on it just above the horizon is our time to be together and dance in the moonlight. Fuck that. I don't. That's not the way I get down.
So what do
I
you think it's going to take?
Well, so let me tell you this. When you watch what happened January 6th, and you watched people show up in the thousands, beat the hell out of 141 police officers at the same time that they were screaming Blue Lives Matter, when you see symbols like the noose show up, when you see symbols like the swastika show up, when you see symbols like battle flag show up, what you're watching is an energy. What you're watching is a reach back into the historical past that has resonance right now. And so when they started kicking out the doors and the windows and shitting on the floors, and none of them died, there was no mass shooting, there was no stopping of it. You're talking about something structural, right? There was a reason why those bodies could do that and be pretty sure that they were not going to be shot on the steps. If that had been 6,000 Black and indigenous people, there wouldn't be enough body bags to stop. That's a structural thing, right? That's not just people being bad or being good. People knew the politics of racialization suggests those white bodies, even though they were causing chaos and horribleness, shall not be intruded upon. That is a structural piece. The white body deems and has deemed itself the supreme standard by which all bodies humanity shall be measured, structurally and philosophically. If you don't understand that, everything else will confuse you.
Right.
That when you watch soldiers in the Ukraine determine who was worthy, right? The race question is a species question first. It was constructed around speciesness and then grafting species on pigmentation.
Yeah.
The question is Asia a human? Is Resmaa a human? And the answer structurally and philosophically in this country is no. It has always been. And that no has been reinforced by every institution, by the scientific institution, by the medical institution, by the educational institution, by the economic institution. I am not human. I am a species on and to ourselves. And anti-Blackness and indigenous invisibility is woven into that structure of hierarchy. So I don't know what the hell it's going to take. What I do know is that it ain't going to happen if white people in mass don't start to begin to rub up against each other's bodies and go through this together and commit to a living embodied anti-racist culture building and to each other, not to me. I'm not your Black Pied Piper. I ain't your guru. I'm not. I have no interest in it. I have interest in you creating a culture among white people by which my children can be driving down the street and not have to get their heads blown off because white folks have never dealt with their fleeing shit.
Yeah. So what's the impetus, right? Like, if this needs to happen, what's the motivation?
To do it for white folks,
Yeah.
white folks have got to decide that they're going to that their self-interest has to be more geared and aligned towards a living embodied anti-racist culture, as opposed to their self-interest being aligned with upholding a racist culture. And so the impetus, unfortunately, in this country, the impetus has to be mass murder. The impetus has to be that things get so bad that white folks see themselves in connection and reclaiming their humanity that they got rid of and accepting whiteness. They have to begin to say, actually, there is more of a cost to not developing a living embodied anti-racism. We have to act. White folks have to say, if I keep doing it like this, the world that I want is not going to have, and that means I have to give up some of my advantage. Right? It is not white people. I stopped saying white privilege. I say, in a society where the white body has deemed and deems itself the supreme standard of humanness, it is not just a privilege to be white, it is a distinct advantage. It is a distinct advantage off top to be born into a white body in a structure that's predicated on the white body deeming itself the standard of humanness. And so for me, the impetus, unfortunately, sometimes is warfare. The impetus is, I see that if I keep in this way and I keep getting shocked by everything, then it makes me blind to what I can actually begin to do and change. And so I hope it doesn't end up like that. But what January 6th tells me is that nothing else grabs the attention of most white people. Guns grab the attention of most white people. Brutality grabs the attention of most white people, but only for short periods of time. And then white bodies want to go back to, well, let's get back to normal. And, I understand racism is important, but so is this. And all of these little escape hatches.
Yes. And normal doesn't work.
It absolutely, it doesn't. So it works in terms of if you want to stay alive. It doesn't work in terms of transformation.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And I think that's a very important point, because what I've heard in that is really it's about a shifting of identity, right? Like, are you going to identify with this essentially old way of being that gets you this far, right? Or can you shift the identity to something that's actually for the liberation of everybody?
But the shifting in identity is an emergent process. And a lot of times people think that the shifting in identity is a declarative process, right? So here's what I mean.
Yeah, break that down.
So I've had a lot of white bodies come up to me and say, I'm an ally. And one of the first questions that I ask is, how would I have known that if you hadn't have told me? Who are the people that you are creating an ally culture with, right? Who are the people that you're raising babies with around a living embodied anti-racist culture and allyship, right? It is not enough. White bodies love declarations of independence from other white bodies. They love declaring themselves good or bad or not Trump, right? But that is inadequate to deal with the pharaohness of this structure. I want you to be nice to me. I want you to be kind to me. I don't want you spitting in my food, but that is not the same thing as developing a living embodied anti-racist culture. It's not the same thing. Niceness and kindness is inadequate.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
So
Thank you so much. One of the things that we focus on in this group is the ability of people to become exponential in their own lives, to take their own experiences, whatever they are, and to share them with others. And you're obviously somebody who has done that. You took a conversation with your grandmother and created this book and all this understanding and these practices. But I'm really curious, what was going on between age 8 and my grandmother's hands?
Living, running, being brutalized, being assaulted, having a lot of joy, having a family that held me, a lot of smelling a lot of things I shouldn't have smelled, seeing a lot of things I shouldn't have seen, um, vibing on things that were both able to keep me safe and put me in to the process of to my pushing me towards my growth edges. Um, I think for me as a black man, as a black man in this particular body in this country, um, that's what I said earlier. I think the prepping of my grandmother's hands was my life experience, was my lived experiences. I think seeing, understanding, you know, that, I think about, I come from a people, right, that, were raped for 250 years legally.
Yeah.
That'll and the only and the one of the and how we survived it was to override, right? The average age of rape of black boys and girls on the plantation was 8 years old. Um, and I think that level of brutality to suggest that time moves that just the march of time moves that feralness and makes it less um, arduous, I think, is a fallacy. We haven't yet to begin to tend to in my practice, one of the things that at one point in my practice, I was getting black women, and it just happened, but I was getting a lot of black women who were suffering from vaginal fibroids, which happens a lot in our community. I did a talk once to a bunch of gynecologists, and watched them do their presentations and everything. And then when I got ready to do my keynote, I walked up and I said, I've noticed that we talk about infant mortality among black women. We talk about how black women died during childbirth, and we never bring in the fact that black women were raped for 250 years and how that might have some impact on their bodies, on the weathering and withering of their bodies, on the weathering and the withering of their fetus's nervous system. And that has gotten compounded for 400 years, but we never start there. So we start with lifestyle. We start with what are you eating? We start with prenatal, all important. And
Right.
this piece, if we're going to bring real healing in, we're going to have to understand the scaffolding of this stuff. Um, and so for me, um, I take the embodiment pieces very, very seriously. Um, um, and even as I'm talking, some people might be noticing right now that there's this bracing, that there's this gripping, that they're all of a sudden they're starting to check out, that they're getting tired, that all of that's the charge.
Mhm.
That's the charge,
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
right? And you have to condition yourself with other bodies to be able to work with that. Otherwise, we genuflect to the cognition, or we genuflect to the mystical, right? Or we genuflect to some way of getting us around it, as opposed to, oh, this is what the charge is. Let me learn and condition my body so I can begin to work with the pressure and the texture and the weight and the volume of this.
Something that somebody said to us a while ago is the mind forgets and the body remembers.
Absolutely.
And
Always.
yeah, and I think that's so much about what we're talking about here, because the body, like your body, is literally made up of the cells and genes from,
Creation.
yeah,
Yeah.
And
exactly.
creation
Yeah.
itself. This is why I tell people we have to work with the trauma of racialization and racism and white body supremacy, because our work is to begin to loosen it some, so that that's actually thwarting the emergence, the beauty, the joy, and all that stuff. The reason why we work with the energy of trauma is so we can loosen it, so something new can emerge. I don't know what that emergence is,
Yeah.
but I know if you keep it locked like that, the thwarting will I mean, genocide and enslavement is a thwarting mechanism. The design of it is to thwart your own internal
Yeah.
kind of emergence. And so you have to work with that, but you have to condition it. And one of the things I say, you have to protect the protect, because a lot of times people have these protective responses, but they are uninterrogated, they're unexamined, and
Yeah.
and time decontextualizes trauma. Right?
Right.
This just a march of time decontextualizes. So by the time it gets to my body, I just know it as notions. By the time it gets to my body, I know it as constrictions, but no articulable way of working with it communally.
Yeah. I think that's like one of the biggest missings that's happening right now, right? Is that especially through education, we talk about this a lot in our group. So a lot of like what we do is also providing context.
Yeah, that's most of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because people like we often say like get your money back from high school, right?
Mhm.
Because it's the context and deliberately so.
Yeah, deliberate. That's
Deliberately
the
so.
that's the structural pieces,
Yes.
Yeah.
right? That's the structural pieces. This is not what happened to my people, did not happen to my people individually. What happened to my people communally. And so to develop individual response to a communal horror is inadequate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Talk more about that.
Well, the many of their approaches that we do are, even though we say they're group and they're communal, they really are not, because they're not getting at the charge. They end up being actually self-care, do this, don't burn out, do that, but it's not culture development,
Right.
right? Because
Right.
culture development means that you temper and condition your body to be able to withhold and withstand the charge and the weight and the capacity of it. And then communally, you develop, or something emerges communally that says, oh, this is helpful for that. Oh, this is, I work with this in this way. It is not just I'm jamming something, some information. It's one of the things that I've been saying, everybody talks about culture and trauma informed. And I say, well, informed is fine, but it's nothing if you are not trauma responsive. You have to
Right.
be both, you have to be responsive, and that takes time to be responsive to the historical trauma that shows up in our bodies.
Yeah. I
Good
think
breath, good breath.
because there's so much here, right? There's so much here. And a lot of what we talk about is like that's the work, right?
Hmm.
Like being able, we call it like
Be
just like
with.
being with
Hmm.
like all of it.
Hmm.
And so often the response is an olive way.
Absolutely.
Too much. Yeah.
Too
It's
much.
too much.
I'm gonna
That's
burn
right.
out. I can't.
That's
It's
right.
overwhelming. Then I get paralyzed and I can't do anything.
That's right.
And like then nothing like but nothing in that. Like I think the biggest loss in that is you don't have the opportunity, and people don't even realize it. The opportunity to actually get at
Yeah.
like the truth of who you are, like who you can actually be, because
Hmm.
you've already decided I can't handle this,
Yeah.
and therefore and like I talk about this a lot because I think like that is actually the and maybe I tell my dad, I'm like, I think like a lot of the issues is like just marketing, right? Like we just
Right.
can't, like black people need better marketing.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But you know I think that's kind of like the biggest thing and tragedy when it comes to when we're talking about the impetus for like white people, white bodied
Hmm.
people to change or to transform, to like do this work to transform, is that we've put up this, and it's the whole the structure, right?
Hmm.
This idea of wall of like what success
Mm.
and
Right and wrong. Yep. Yep.
looks like,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What we
Yeah.
don't think is the top,
Right.
it's really a ceiling.
That's exactly right. That's right. So in my work, because I work with the body, in my work, I really talk to people about nibbling as opposed to gorging,
Mhm.
right? That that when I say that white body supremacy is traumatizing off top, I really mean that. That's not a catchphrase to me. That when you're dealing with trauma, you can't gorge on it. You can't like, I'm gonna eat the whole thing. You have to take very small nibbles of it. And then a lot, it's just like when we got our vaccines for COVID, right? They didn't take um, virus and slam it into our bodies. Our bodies couldn't handle that. What does it do? It gives us a little bit of it, so our body's defense mechanisms begin to create the antibodies in order to thwart, right, the expression of the full the full virus, right? This is the same way. And this is why I say it's going to take at least 9-10 generations, is because that piece is a slow, um, evaluative, communal and individual piece. Being able to notice the vortex of trauma and notice that I don't want to look at it, but if I don't look at it, can I at least look at it this much? And that's enough. Or can I at least look at it that much? And that's enough. And do that every day. And then notice the discernment that happens when you're doing it. Something else will emerge. I don't know what that is, but what I do know is that if you don't nibble and slow it down, you will be overwhelmed because you have not been conditioned by how to hold it. So the next move is overwhelmed. And so for me, that's why I talk about it in this way. That's why I talk about it in slow nibbles with other bodies, as opposed to trying to gorge on it.
Mm-hmm. This is great. So I'm just reading. Terry has a data point for us, right? She says in summer of 2020, we used to get 30 to 50 people a month at our free embodied anti-racist practice group training. And last month we had one person, and now we hold them quarterly. So there is this question, right? And we asked this question even in this group. And I will say that we have had a commitment to show up daily in this group, to have our daily actions show up daily, to not just say like, oh, something happened, everybody in, and to create that. And we do a lot of that as really just that, right? Like the daily actions are just nibbles of information. Like maybe you've never heard of the Wilmington massacres, maybe you, and of course you haven't, right? That, to your point, is by design,
Right.
And I think that that's a really big piece of it too, is that you sort of wake up one day as a white person and you're like, what? That is not what they said, and if you do take that all in at once, it is, you're not gonna, it's not sustainable, right? We talk a lot about sustainability, and I've had friends say to me, oh my gosh, when that first happened, I just went down the rabbit hole and I was reading everything and watching all the news, and like, I found it was taking a toll on me.
Yeah.
Stop.
Let me say something about that.
Yeah.
When bodies of culture and Black bodies in particular hear shit like that from white people, we lose our fucking mind.
Of course.
And I'm serious. It is one of the things that makes us not want to fuck with y'all, right? Because when you say stuff like that, you think you're actually like coming to some epiphany, right? And what happens in our bodies is we go, I can't fuck with you. I'm like, you just said something that is like brutal, right?
Yeah.
And you have no idea that is brutal, right? And that piece that you said earlier, where the person said, the data point said, we started off with these many people right after, and now we're down to this. That's the point. That's what I'm talking about. That that the development of a culture means that even if one person shows up, we still have our asses here in these seats, and we're gonna keep doing this over and over and over again. Your people are not the people you start with; it's the people you end with. And so these reps and getting these pieces in is not about something happened or some episodic occurrence. It
Right.
always, I don't, as a black body, I cannot move through the world in episodes. That's not what's happening to me. This shit is structural.
Right.
every day.
It's
Right.
structural every day and it's persistent.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so when white bodies say, "Oh my God, I went down the rabbit hole and it was taking a toll on me," I'm like, "Yeah, right. It is. It's weathering you." Right now,
Yeah.
imagine what it's doing to me and what it's done to my
My
ancestors, and now
grandmother.
showing up in me. Imagine what it's doing to my son and my daughter.
Mhm.
But you get to just opt out and not show up to shit anymore. You get to just, cut your blonde dreadlocks and move out to a fucking suburb and nobody ever know that you were in the mix because you got tired.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's why I talk about it in generations. That shit is so insidious, and white folks have no collective acuity or agility when it comes to race. None. Collectively, none.
Mhm.
I'm not talking about individual white folks. That's
Of
not
course.
that's
Yeah.
not who's blowing my kids' heads off,
Right.
right? It is
Right.
the structure that says you will be protected if you create mayhem on the black body. You will be protected.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I did. Something that I like what you said when you're talking about getting the reps in,
Yeah.
right? And so I think what people don't really realize is that what created this culture and how we live is repetition of this one idea, right? It's repetition. So if you
And
were
repetition through in and around every philosophy and structure and industry.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I don't know if y'all really got what just got said right here. Right? I don't know
Yeah.
that y'all really got what just got dropped here.
Mhm.
All right? What just got dropped here was the key to creating a new culture.
Mhm.
That no matter what, you show up. No matter what.
Show up
Over and
and
over
over and
and
over,
over
and
and
then you
over.
pause and you allow yourself to be vulnerable to another white body or another body of culture. You allow yourself, you don't look for the black pied piper, you don't look for the Asian pied piper. You do this shit and earn this shit honestly by keep coming back, saying stupid shit and writing it down and pausing and then coming back again. That's it. Otherwise, it's bullshit. Otherwise it's performative. Otherwise, all of y'all had fucking George Floyd signs and George Floyd's picture
Well,
in your profile, and now we look at it and it's back to foods and fucking cats. And then but yet I'm supposed to come and fillet myself, right, in terms of how this has impacted me, so you can be enlightened, but you have no stamina. Absolutely none.
that's how this group started. I saw that my um, black friends were just posting these gut-wrenching videos and sharing things and having a conversation. And then my white friends were having manicures and margaritas. And so and then I realized that wasn't, of course, right? That's not every single one of my white friends. But I said, okay, like those of you who care, come over here. And then the nice thing is that did attract more people than we imagined it would attract. And if you look at this group collectively, to your point, you will see there are people, you said it's not who you start with, it's who you end with. And I look in this group and I'm like, yep, that person's been here every time, all along, all along, all along. If you look at what are all these words? The growth of this group, it was 10,000 people within 3 days, 40,000 within a month. And I think in the last 2 years, we've added another 5 or 6,000. And some of them, it gets to be too much and they're out. So it's really, it's fascinating, I think, to look at it and to create that distinction between the individual and the culture. And yet, if it is a collective of individuals showing up, that is how we create
That's how you begin to start to create the container. So
Yeah.
the emergence can actually happen. But a lot of times people want to jump over the emergence and the creation of the container in
Yeah.
order to get to some Shangri-La And you probably can hear it in my voice. I don't really have any fucking time for it anymore. I just, I,
Do you talk
Husband's
about
all
that?
done.
Do you talk about
I,
that in your new book?
absolutely, absolutely.
Good.
That's what the whole thing is about.
Awesome.
It's about, look, that was a seminal moment, and white folks in particular, y'all sitting up here being shocked by every damn thing is putting you in a vulnerable position for when these dudes,
Yeah.
when these over 10 to 20 million people with AR-15s who are aligned with this plantation ethic and aligned with this, there's a right way and a wrong way, and there's humans and non-humans, and they start waving a gun in your face. You're either going to align yourself with them or you're going to die. And I don't think that many white people in particular understand that they can say now, oh, I'm an ally and stuff like that. But what happens when that allyship begins to have you losing your job and relationship? What
Right.
happens when that allyship starts to begin to be in real feral danger, when people who, just because they're white and in white bodies like you, don't give a shit about your babies? And you sitting up here, being shocked and not preparing is useless. And so that's where it's at for me. That's what Quaking is about, is that some of the things that you think you have done in order to work with this, it's a whole nother game. They are not playing. These people are not playing. They
Right.
are, I tell people all the time, there was an American Nazi party,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Those seeds of that, and the seeds, sprung out of the KKK and the White Citizens Council, those seeds and plantations, those seeds have not gone anywhere. Those seeds and the germination of those seeds found a lot of fertilization during the Trump administration, but even before that, we
Oh,
genuflect to pieces that are really at its nature white supremacist,
Yeah.
but we genuflect to it and call it something else. And so that's why I'm just I don't have no time um, for the kind of performative pieces. It's worthless to me.
Yeah, and I think what's like most frustrating is like we see it in the ebb and flow of this group, right? When a black person gets shot,
mm-hmm.
we get a bunch of new people.
Mm-hmm.
And then crickets. And I think what happens is, I mean, I call it the okey doke, right?
Hmm.
It's where
Hmm.
people like they get distracted by life as if this is not a part
That's
of
it. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
like, oh, this is this thing I do on the side. It's
That's
funny.
exactly right.
I talk to a lot of DE&I consultants and they talk about the same thing. They're like, well, they're doing this as an add-on. And I'm like, no, this is your business. Like
That's
this
right.
is it.
That's exactly right. That's it.
Yeah.
But see, that's the piece that I'm talking about. Don't get me. We ain't got enough time for
I want to tell people
lot.
to get this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So maybe next time I'll talk about DEI, because I think it really is a profession that was built on white comfort.
Yes.
That the whole structure of it was built. If you never ask diverse from what, then it can be anything. It could
Yeah.
be collard green Tuesday, fried bread Wednesday. It could be all of these kind of like aesthetic things, but nothing that has culture tied to it.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, that's what DEI is. So if people are interested in more, they can go to resmaa.com, resmaa.com. And I have classes up there, and my new book, Quaking of America. Let me show that. The Quaking of America.
When is it
Yes.
Um,
coming out now?
yeah, Tuesday. So it
Oh,
comes out on Tuesday.
oh
Uh,
my. Okay.
yeah, come to my. I also encourage people to come to my Instagram and follow me on my Instagram. I put a lot of free content up
Yeah.
on there, and start with the book slow and get together with two other bodies and say we're going to do this from now on. On average, it takes people 9 months to get through that book, 9 to 13 months, and it also takes a lot of time um, to process the. That's why I say people don't read my book. You do my book, because the
Yeah.
practices are the most important thing. So, yeah.
Beautiful. So everybody, if you're gonna get his book, get it from his site. All right. So like it directly supports him.
And
Go.
please pre-order. Please pre-order. The pre-order,
Yeah.
y'all, is I mean, it really helps for next week if you pre-order.
We'll make that an action as well. But yeah, order the book. Is it gonna be on Audible or audio?
Yes, they're working on that now, but it probably won't be till the end of the month.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Pre-order the book. Go there right now. Go follow Resmaa. Is it at
It's
Resmaa?
Resmaa Menakem, at Resmaa Menakem.
At Resmaa
Yeah.
Menakem. Good. Ashley, if you can put that in the chat as well. Resmaa, thank you so much. This
You're
was
welcome.
whew,
I know.
You're welcome.
I love
You're
it.
welcome.
I love it. I do look forward to the conversation on DEI.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
question of diverse from what is
yeah,
what started Asia's interest in
yeah.
pursuing conversations with DEI.
Yeah, if you don't answer that question, if you don't say when you say diversity, you're usually starting with something and then you're diversifying from it for whatever reason. And if you don't say we're starting with the notion that the white body is the supreme standard by which all bodies humanity shall be measured structurally and philosophically, if you don't start with that, then you're not diversifying from anything. You're diversifying from this moving target. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh,
You have to say that first. In all of my trainings, I say if you don't say that first, then the onus is immediately shifted from bodies of cult from white bodies to bodies of culture to now educate and show the way. And you have to say, no, the onus is white body supremacy. That's where we're starting first, and then we're diversifying from it. The onus is white body supremacy. So that's where we're starting first, and we want to include more things into that in order to disperse it so other people can live and prosper and be liberated, right? But if you just say diversity, equity, and inclusion without any moorings, then that's when you end up having situations where people end up like, man, I ain't going to that damn training no more.
yes, exactly. Exactly. No one can get anybody to show up to their group.
That's right. That's because people end up getting violated in those situations. But in that the unspoken is that the white comfort shall be centered.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. Absolutely.
All right.
Woo.
All right, y'all.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Talk to y'all soon.
Take care.